Good morning, Coalition of Concerned Republicans. It's great to be with you today. My friend Chuck Benoit is with me, as always, at Restoring Our American Republic. We think we have some pretty interesting content for you. We think that Speaker of the House, Danny Perez, is giving us a master class in how to leverage political influence. And we're going to talk about that today. So let's bring Chuck on and let's see how he's doing. Chuck, how's it going?
Good morning, Mike. Doing just fine. It was an interesting read that we went through here, and looking forward to getting into it.
Exactly. All right. So let's just say that Chuck and I stumbled across some media posts, I guess yesterday, and the reporting that we're going to do today was published by MSN.com, and the Miami Herald did a piece on it too. So we're just going to talk about, Danny Perez is coming to the end of his Speaker of the House term and is termed out of the Florida House. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And one thing I want to make, but first of all, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like, share. Let's try to get a little viewership going on here. So we really appreciate your help with that. If you would do that, we'd really like it, particularly if you'll share it on your social media. That'd be great. But it is interesting. Let's start off by the fact that the Trump administration has nominated Danny Perez to be the ambassador to Brazil, point number one. And then a subplot of that conversation is that the first thought that the Trump administration had for Danny Perez was to challenge James Uthmeier for his attorney general slot. So if you go back to the legislative session where Ron DeSantis called a special session of the legislature to address immigration, and you saw the divide between the legislature and the DeSantis administration on legislation, now you're seeing another example of the divide between the Trump administration and the DeSantis administration when the Trump administration encourages Danny Perez, the exiting Speaker of the House, to challenge James Uthmeier, who's a pretty popular AG, for the Attorney General position. But Danny Perez gave that a think, and decided he didn't want to challenge Uthmeier for the Attorney General slot. And that culminated in the Trump administration offering him the ambassadorship to Brazil. And of course, a very simple question came out over the last few days. Does Danny Perez speak Portuguese? And the answer is he will not answer the question, which leads me to believe the answer is no. So the fact is, and I just want to talk about this a little bit, Chuck, because Brazil is critical. And if Danny Perez has no connection to Brazil, then I would say it's risky to put him in as an ambassador, knowing if you look at BRICS, BRICS nations, right, you're looking at Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. And if I refer to my notes here, a bunch of other countries have lined up with those countries to actually destabilize the United States dollar as the global currency. And those countries would be Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, wait for it, Saudi Arabia, wait for it, United Arab Emirates, and Indonesia. So these countries are working together, and Brazil being one of those countries, very critical. The ambassador to Brazil is going to find himself in a position to influence some of the most world-altering politics known to man. Chuck, what do you think about that?
Well, it is, again, as you say, the whole BRICS thing has been a little bit of a thorn. It's my impression that that's kind of what President Trump is trying to destroy as he works in the Middle East anyway, to try to pull those Arabian companies out of that whole situation. But We
I
shall
would
see.
agree with that. Because, you know, Donald Trump is very committed to maintaining the U.S. dollar as the world currency. That is very important to Donald Trump, and I would suggest it's very important to America.
Absolutely, absolutely.
right.
So, what about this Perez guy? You know, what's going on? What did this article kind of bring to the forefront, other than the fact that we're not really sure he speaks Portuguese?
Well, it's interesting. A couple of weeks ago, you and I agreed that over the next few weeks or even months, if it takes that long, you and I would do as much reporting on how elected officials influence their position power. And our original thought was to suppress elections. But this is even above that, right? So now you got a guy, Danny Perez, who got elected to the Florida House. He was nominated by his class to be the Speaker of the House. He became the Speaker of the House, and now he's influencing future Speakers of the House by telling the incoming freshman class who they will appoint as their Speaker designate, which is massively powerful, right?
Right.
And now since Danny Perez, here we go, Chuck. Now, because Danny Perez had to file financial documents to the federal government because ambassadors have to be Senate confirmed, we're starting for the first time to peel the onion back on Danny Perez's personal business activities. Chuck, you want to kind of chime in here and kind of paint a little bit of a picture on what we're talking about here? Help me out.
I guess just sticking with the article itself, we're talking about some private clients that he's been working with, CDR McGuire in particular. They managed to get about $120 million in new government contracts. He represented Newsmax, who actually lost the lawsuit, costing about $67 million, and the article kind of calls that a far-right organization. I don't know how far-right Newsmax is, but it's certainly right. And then there was
right of CNN. It's right of MS Now.
Well, I agree with that, but I don't call that far right. I would actually kind of paint that more in the middle, but that's me.
I think if you and I went any more right, Chuck, would probably fall off the edge of the world.
Conceivable. The more interesting situation is with the company Airbnb, because there was some legislation out there that could have really helped them that somehow just failed to get out of the Daniel Perez's house.
Well, it's also interesting, Chuck. I don't think we can discount the fact that this company, CDR McGuire, has affiliated companies too. And those affiliated companies have earned over $200 million in contracts from the state of Florida in the last 2 years. Associated with basically disaster mediation. And then, you know, it's another really interesting as we go through this conversation. I want to connect the dot between Danny Perez and Ron DeSantis, and then Ron DeSantis with the Bush administration, Chuck.
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and do that, because I didn't really see that much in the article, but you know a little bit more about that than possibly they do.
Well, it's interesting. Basically, the financial disclosure that Perez filed said that he earned north of $1.1 million in personal fees associated with his private law practice. And he runs his private law practice through a firm called RHF Law, whatever that is. And RHF is a guy named, I think, Roberto Fernandez. And the DeSantis appointed Fernandez to the 11th Circuit Judicial Nominating Commission. Okay? Now, we have that. All the judicial circuits have nominating commissions, right? And this guy Fernandez was, I think, the legal counsel for Jeb Bush when he was governor. So you can see that even though the names and faces of these past or politicians is not necessarily in the headlines every day, this is another example of the power doesn't go away. And you can take a look now at our CD11 race and CD6 race and stuff like that, and look at the endorsements in these races, and you see that once these people have served in very high positions of power, their influence doesn't stop. Okay? It continues. So you get into the riff and you go back to 2015 when Donald Trump was running for president for the very first time. And Donald Trump is calling out President Bush 43 for alleged involvement in the 9/11 attack on our country. And, that wound has not healed. So I don't think that is a repairable relationship between the Trump wing of the Republican Party, if you want to call it that anymore, and the Bush wing of the party. So that hasn't ended. And Ron DeSantis has ties to the Bush wing. And of course, Ron DeSantis struggles with his relationship with the Trump administration today. And then it's exemplified by DeSantis appointing people who were affiliated with the Bush administration, the Bush family, to positions of high power. And I would suggest to you that appointing judges or vetting judges is a very, very powerful position. Chuck, can you agree with that?
Yeah, and we'll get to that, I think, a little while down the road here. We got several things between that, where we are and that. But to Perez himself basically says, well, that there's an expansive reach in government and touches so many different sectors that it's hard for him to not necessarily be involved in these kind of things. But he also says that he tries very hard to not take clients that might cause a little bit of a discomfort. So the question is, has he? It sounds to me.
Well, what I'm saying to you is that number one, there's two things. I think that Perez, in this one little article, which is not a lot of information really, when you look at all the information that is potentially out there, I think Perez contradicts himself. Okay. So on your point that you just made, he didn't say he tries to avoid these types of improprieties. He says going forward, he will try to, as an ambassador, he will no longer work for the clients that he's worked on previously, and he will not be involved in anything with Airbnb as it relates to his ambassadorship in Brazil for 1 year. 1 year after he terminates his relationship with Airbnb. It's a 1 year suspension of that. So so again, what he's admitting is when he says he's going to no longer work for his current clients, he's going to resign from the RHF law firm, he's no longer going to deal with anything that's related to his ambassadorial duties with Airbnb for 1 year, he's actually admitting that what he was doing in Florida is inappropriate. And right? I mean, let me tell you something. This is true. We all know this, that the Speaker of the House determines what legislation gets committee assignments and what legislation does not. Okay? So the Airbnb issue with these accessory dwelling units, for the audience, let's just be clear, that legislation that passed 38-0 in the Florida Senate addresses accessory dwelling units, which creates statute that says if you own a single family home, you have the right automatically under just property rights to build an accessory dwelling unit, also known as a granny flat, in your backyard. Now, here in Florida, we have tourist destinations all over this state. So how many homeowners would build a hotel room, an accessory dwelling unit or a granny flat in their backyard so they can make $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 a year by renting out that granny flat? And Airbnb knows that a lot of people will do that when they are given the opportunity to do it. So all of that gets marketed on Airbnb, which is a huge revenue stream for Airbnb. And by the way, there's a lot of short-term rental properties in Brazil that also use Airbnb as the platform through which they do their rentals. So that's massive for Airbnb to have a relationship with the United States ambassador to Brazil. Okay? But here's the really important part. That when the Senate passed the bill 38-0, they stripped out the right to build these accessory. That what they did was they prohibited short-term rentals in the granny flats. Let me say it again. The Senate 38-0 prohibited short-term rentals in the granny flats. And as soon as that happened, the bill went dead on the House side, which is just a clear indication that on the House side, the short-term rental component of the legislation was what the House leadership was after. Danny Perez is House leadership. Bills don't get committee assignments without the Speaker of the House approval. So therefore, Danny Perez wanted short-term rentals to be a component of the accessory dwelling units and that legislation because it benefits his client, Airbnb, Chuck. That is the bottom line on that.
Yeah. And to your point, the unanimously passed, I'm reading here out of the article, the unanimously passed Senate bill also included a strict ban on using ADUs, or these granny flats, as short-term rentals, a measure that posed a clear threat to Airbnb and other vacation rentals. And that's the point. And the point is,
let me just weigh in on that, Chuck. It's not a threat to Airbnb. Airbnb already has a massive market in Florida. What it is, it's blocking a huge upside to their volume.
Yeah.
You know, other people are building these rentable units and at no cost to Airbnb. So when I was in the hotel business, Chuck, if I wanted to add more hotel rooms to my property, I had to shell out the cash to build those hotel rooms. Airbnb doesn't have to do that. You just sign up and start paying them fees immediately. Okay? So this is just a boondoggle. I mean, if that would have passed and short-term rentals being permitted, then thousands of these granny flats would have been built all over the state of Florida, and almost all of them would have used Airbnb at least partially in conjunction with other platforms for their bookings, and Airbnb would take a commission on all of those rentals, which is huge amount of money. So to allow this bill to die in committee after being passed unanimously through the Senate after prohibiting short-term rentals in granny flats, it's just clearly obvious that the short-term rental component of the bill is what the speaker wanted on behalf of his client, Chuck.
Yeah, now again, Perez claims no involvement with that bill, and he says, again, that his legal work has been confined to private parties and transactions outside of Florida. So,
and I call BS on that.
Well, that's his statement. I'm just putting it out there.
I call BS on that. And that's another piece of the puzzle, right? Because when you get over to the CDR McGuire piece too, Chuck, yeah, he also says, well, you know, there's a separation between the legislative branch and the executive branch, you know, and of course, my client, I can't help my client because my client doesn't deal with the legislature. They deal with the executive branch for contracts. Oh, really? And you know, it's amazing, right? That these guys are so, I love tone deaf, right? So not self-aware that they don't understand that we understand that communication is verbal and nonverbal, right? You know, you got to watch out for not only what's said, but most importantly, Chuck, what is not said. As we said in our last broadcast, the iceberg is mostly underwater. You don't get to see it. And this is a classic example of this article revealing stuff that you can look at the little tip of the iceberg that juts out over the top of the water, but what the real story is underwater. And that's what we're talking about right now. So don't tell me that just because the Speaker of the House, Danny Perez, and the Governor, Ron DeSantis, aren't exchanging written memos and going on the record, with their affiliation between Perez's clients and the contractors who awarded over $200 million in contracts to CDR related companies, right? That Danny Perez knew nothing about it. He had nothing to do with it. That's just BS.
Yeah, you might be able to be that blunt about it, but it is true that.
Come on, Chuck. Come on.
Yeah, I get it.
What world are we living in?
I know, Mike. You're just far more willing to say those things than I, but that's okay.
Why is that? I mean, come on.
Well, I probably because you have so much more history.
Chuck, I'm just telling you something. Sit around the table and do deals. I don't care what business you're in. I'm in the real estate business, right? My business has been transactional my whole life, okay? And anybody that doesn't understand that there's stuff going on behind the scenes that you don't understand, that is not made, that is not brought to the table and discussed, if you don't understand that, then you're a pretty bad negotiator, because, that's just the way it is. We can get into that another time, but honestly and truly, that is just, if anybody who believes that everything that is related to a transaction is addressed and is front of mind aware, which I used to tell my clients that I want them to go into every transaction with their eyes open. But when you start getting into this level of negotiations, and then the idea that everybody goes in with their eyes open is just a fallacy. It's just not true. Chuck.
Yeah. So you alluded to this also. The law firm, RHF law firm, that Perez is involved with. He's one of two lawyers, and the other is Robert H. Fernandez. And he is a DeSantis appointee to the 11th Circuit Judicial Nominating Commission. So he's a part of of Perez's company here, and or they're both involved in the same company. And he's on the Judicial Nominating Committee for the 11th Circuit. That's I don't know. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah, you have a lot of influence over who the judges are. So this goes back to our beef. That the citizens of our state are not allowed to choose leadership, okay? This is how it always happens. You and I both know this firsthand, that, when, let's just say, grassroots person steps up, like, for example, Joe Strada. He's a classic example. Joe Strada running for Congress in CD11 against Kerry Baker and Tim Wilkins and Nisam Razak and the lady, which I can't remember her name now, which means she's probably not going to win. People who've never been involved in politics, pop our head up and say, hey, I think I'd like to be a congressman. And all the people that have been congressmen before and that run, that hold public office, they say, oh, let's play whack-a-mole. That's what that is. Either maybe we like this guy. And it looks like Joe Strada has gotten into the good graces of our legislative delegation. So he's being supported. But typically, 9 times out of 10, an outsider pops his head up or her head up and says, hey, I want to be an elected official. They take that little mallet and they pop you on the head so you go back down into your hole. So this is the same thing with these judges, Chuck. And judges are crucially important, Chuck. I can't tell you. Do you know how critical it is in anyone's life when you've got to go stand in front of a judge? That is a monumental moment in your life. How often do people do that? And these judges have major influence over your destiny, Chuck. So to be on a board that vets and filters who gets to be a judge, that is beyond influential, Chuck.
There you go. And as we kind of come to the end of our time here, let's just talk about Perez, he says that if his ambassadorship nomination is confirmed, that there are a few things that he will do. One of them is that he would stop representing all of his current clients. I guess that means as well that he's resigning from the RHF law firm.
No. He specifically said he's, in addition to not representing his clients anymore, he's also resigning or unaffiliating with the RHF law firms. That's two things he's going to do. What else is he going to do, Chuck?
He's going to resign from the Doctors Healthcare Plans Incorporated. I guess Perez,
which he gets 120 grand plus a year by being in-house counsel to that organization, which is an insurance company that specializes in Medicare policies, again, tied directly to the government.
Yes, and then fourthly, he's going to pledge to not participate in any ambassadorial matters that are related to current clients, such as Airbnb, for at least 1 year. I think you were noting that as well.
So that to me is an admission. That is an admission that what he's been doing is inappropriate, Chuck, in my mind. If you got to quit what you've been doing in order to establish your ethics, that means that what you've been doing in the past is unethical. That's my read.
Well, and obviously you have an opinion, and it's not that you're...
No, it's not an opinion, Chuck. It's connect the dots. I mean, I don't want to belabor it, Chuck, but it sounds like I have to. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, for the last 2 years, I've been engaged in these activities, but I'm telling you that a part-time legislature could never serve the interests of families because retirees and wealthy people just don't connect with working families. So that is a strength of our government here in Florida, is that we have a part-time legislature who also work and have a, private business activities on the outside. But I would suggest to you that legislators who have private business activities on the outside leverage their position as legislators to self-enrich off of their influence as legislators. So for me personally, if I was voting as to whether I want a part-time legislature or if I want retirees and wealthy people to run my legislature, I think I'll opt for retirees and wealthy people who don't need the money or want the money because they're not in their primary earning years. I trust them more than a bunch of crooked lawyers who make deals with CDR McGuire and Newsmax and Airbnb. I'd rather have those nice people in the villages run the state, Chuck. That'd be great for me.
Well, that's good to know, Mike.
Why not? They don't have any skin in the game. They can separate themselves from self-enrichment, which Danny Perez obviously has not.
Yeah. Well, Mike, I think we've kind of hit this pretty hard today, and I know we've never really been great fans of Danny Perez, but we're also not good fans of legislative situation here in Florida as well. As we come to our last minute, why don't you just give us a final?
I don't really, obviously, I think Danny Perez has been a horrible Speaker of the House. Okay. Pretty much, I don't know, I don't want to say everybody, but I really don't want to dislike Danny Perez. And I understand that most Speaker of the House is engaged in similar types of activities. So I'm not holding him out as a rogue criminal or anything like that. My point is, Chuck, we talked earlier in this broadcast, that this is how power is leveraged. That's the only point I'm making here. And as we go through additional episodes on this broadcast, we're going to continue to point out ways where elected officials solidify themselves in office, makes it very difficult to defeat them. And money is a huge influencer over electability. And of course, that influence also moves money and votes. So this is just an example, an opportunity to put a spotlight on how that is actually done. And that takes us back to our title for this broadcast, which is Florida House Speaker Danny Perez provides a master class on how influence is leveraged, Chuck. So we're back to the beginning. That's all we're saying here. So why don't we just admit it and move on, Chuck?
Well, let's just do that. Thank you, Mike Levine, and thank you all for tuning into our twice weekly live stream. Please follow us on Facebook and X at RestoreOurRep76. Check us out on YouTube at Restoring Our American Republic -ROAR. Please like and share the program, and remember, if you're unwilling to govern yourself, you will be governed by tyrants. Until next time, God bless you, God bless President Donald J. Trump, and God bless America.